What is up, fam? We are continuing our series, More Than a Hashtag, because like we talked about last week, social media has become this incredible tool for spreading the word about injustice or crisis quickly, especially for those whose voices are silenced or ignored offline. But the real question we have to ask is this all it takes? Is writing a post or hopping on the trend of a hashtag really all it takes to make a difference in the world? Or is it possible that justice is about something more than a hashtag? Well, I believe it is. And I believe that there is something more that we can do. And so we're going to talk about that. And today we're going to talk about the first way you and I can begin to really make a difference. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you about another hashtag or trend or whatever you want to call it. This hashtag, this trend known as celebrity mean tweets, started by our friend Jimmy Kimmel. He started this whole thing where they would read tweets or mean tweets about different celebrities and have celebrities read them. Now, I don't have any celebrities with us today, but I thought I would read some of these to you. And whether you've heard this or not, I imagine most of you can relate. Maybe you've heard of some of these celebrities. Maybe you would even agree with some of the things that are said, or I imagine you'll react to it in some way. So here, just let me read these and let's see what you think. Here's the first one. Kate Hudson is a dead-eyed trash bag that smells like low tide. How about this one? Chris Evans is a stupid bearded sweater wearing dumb dork. Or how about Paul Rudd is the most boring vanilla dude. You know, he just sits at home with his wife having a bland spaghetti dinner talking about his day. Or how about why does Ryan Gosling always look like he's trying to squeeze a fart out without making a noise? Or has Zac Efron ever been in a film where he didn't play a total douche? I've never seen one of his films. I'm just judging by his face. Or how about, I bet Tom Holland is one of those whiteys who claps when the plane lands. I may actually do that. Or how about, I just cut a fart that smells so bad they added David Spade as a supporting character. Or Daniel Radcliffe is one of God's most unattractive creations since the aardvark. Or Benedict Cumberbatch always looks like he's had an allergic reaction to bad shrimp. And finally, Jake Gyllenhaal has the most punchable face of all time. I'd like nothing more than to sock him in his ugly, soft, starry-eyed pug face. Now, I don't know how those made you feel or how they made you react. Whether you thought some of those were funny, whether you thought, wow, those are just plain hurtful, or they even maybe some of them made you feel a little uncomfortable. I don't know how those affected you or what you thought of them, but one thing I do know to be true of most of us, to be true of most of you, if asked, you would most likely say that you would never say something like that. That you would never talk about someone like that. And especially to their face, right? Yet the unfortunate thing is, although many of us say that, we have all most likely at some point used social media or another online platform to say something hurtful. Because the reality is just like these celebrity mean tweets, sometimes people get attacked. They get attacked online for no reason at all. And what's unfortunate is we aren't bothered by it because we are separated from the person at the receiving end. Yet most of us, if we knew the person personally, if you had a personal relationship with any of these celebrities, or if something like this was being said about a close friend or a family member, you wouldn't label it as funny or entertaining. You'd label it as hurtful or downright atrocious to say something like that. So why do I start here? Because unfortunately, more often than not, this same mindset bleeds over into our attempt to fight injustice, especially when that injustice is paired with a hashtag. I can't tell you, with everything going on in our country right now, with Black Lives Matter and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and whatnot, like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen tweets, posts, comments, or even talked to people in person, and I've heard more about attacking and demonizing the offender involved rather than speaking against the injustice. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great things being said. There's a lot of awareness being made. But the unfortunate thing is, in the midst of that, there's also a lot of attacking going on. Like, for example, I've talked to people personally, in person, both in person and online, like, where they're just saying things like, protesters, gosh, they're just dumb, ignorant, and violent. Man, if they would just stop. I mean, can you believe that they were on streets and destroying buildings and businesses of their own, of other black people? Or just the things they're doing so dumb, it's not helping the situation. Or even about police officers, right? They've been labeled as racist or corrupt. Man, the police officers, they're all just so racist. They're all so corrupt. They don't help at all. The whole police system just needs to come down. Or even more specifically about the people involved. People like Derek Chavez, or some of the other names that have come up. The two men who were involved with Ahmaud Arbery. We talk about those people, and I can't tell you how, more often than not, I've heard them talked about as just terrible people, monsters, evil people, just deserving the worst punishment. I've even heard things said about George Floyd, like, he's just a criminal. There's a reason what happened to him. And I say all that. I'm not saying I agree with any of those things being said. I'm just telling you what I've heard. And again, are good things being brought to the surface. But unfortunately, some of that's being drowned out by comments like this. Because the reality is people get attacked online when someone feels wronged by them and is looking for justice. And so people start hashtags. They declare campaigns, or they rally their friends to go after someone online because they believe they've done something wrong and they must be punished. Right? Even beyond the injustices we are facing right now, there are countless stories of people who have received so much negative online backlash, so much attacking, so much demonizing because of their bad behavior that they've lost their jobs. They've had to leave their home, or they've even had to change their names. And this is where things get complicated as far as justice goes. And you're going to hear me say this over and over again. You're going to hear us talk about this throughout the rest of this series. Is justice is about making wrong things right. And usually making wrong things right requires someone to be punished or held accountable for their actions. But can our desires to punish someone who has done wrong ever go too far? Is there another way? How do we hold people accountable for their actions in a way that honors God? And that's what I'd like to start talking about. Because last week we said God is calling each of us to do something to fight for justice. And today I want to begin talking about how and how not we can do that. And so to start, I would like to revisit a verse we looked at last week. This is Micah 6:8, where we read, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." And so today I want to focus on where Micah talks about mercy. And I think this idea of God's mercy is best defined in the person of Jesus. I mean, his life embodied mercy. Sometimes mercy is defined in contrast to grace. You maybe sometimes you even get the two confused. I often do, but really mercy and grace, a lot of the time they will go together. I've heard it said like this: if grace is like getting a gift we don't deserve, then mercy is not getting what we do deserve. Let me tell you a story to give you an example. A while ago, I think maybe it was like a year ago or so, Amy and I, my wife, we were hanging. We decided to do some spring cleaning. Clean out everything. We'd let some stuff get out of hand, as I'm sure maybe you've done as well. But or maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just us. But anyway, we wanted to do some spring cleaning, and so we went to it, started cleaning things out, and all of a sudden I heard Amy go, "Oh!" That excited gasp, right? Like that moment that you're like, "Whoa, I found something." And so I rush over and I wanted to see what she had found, what was going on. And she pulls out this box, this little square box, and pulls out this mask. And I'm like, okay, what's the deal with this? And she goes on to explain that this is a masquerade mask that she got with her mom at Epcot in Disney World. And it was just this special moment that she got to share with her mom. She'd actually even forgotten about the mask, thought that she would never see it again. And beyond that, she went on to explain this mask was worth $200. Like it was a rare, like it was a pretty high-end mask. It was a nice mask and one that meant a lot to her. And so she was excited to find it. And I was excited for her. And I was like, man, I don't really get why a mask is so cool. But that I could see the excitement in her, and it was a cool looking mask. So we were excited. We finished spring cleaning, put everything, we left some stuff out because we were tired and didn't throw everything away that we'd wanted to get rid of yet. And so, later that week, I started throwing things away. And I started putting things away because the trash was coming the next day. And so I got all that taken care of, and we got it all cleaned up. We were all finished. And then the next day, Amy comes to me and she's like, "Hey, have you seen my mask?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. Where did you last leave it?" "Well, I left it in the box." And that's where I froze up. And I got that feeling, you get in your gut like, oh, crap. Because I'd realized that I'd thrown that box away. And there was no getting that back because the trash had already come. And in that moment, that split second, it's like time froze, and I had decided like, oh man, here it goes. She's going to be so mad at me. And I deserve every bit of it because I screwed up. I messed up. She had just found this, and I ruined it for her. I've ruined her happiness, and I deserve whatever she's about to say to me. And the way Amy responded, I will never forget. She looks at me, she sighs because she's disappointed, right? And she goes, "It's okay. I know you didn't mean to. I forgive you." And in that moment, I knew Amy loved me, cared about me, more than her things. And here's the deal. I deserved whatever she decided to say at me because I screwed up. I let her down. There was, I didn't pay enough attention. I didn't take into consideration. And she had every right to yell at me, get mad at me, to blame me, whatever. But she didn't. She offered me mercy. She didn't give me what I deserved. Well, in the book of Luke, we're told about a somewhat similar story to the one that I experienced with Amy. About this moment in Jesus' life where he is invited to a dinner party by a group of Pharisees, or you can call them religious leaders. And this was, for the most part, a fairly normal party, except for one particular person who showed up. We aren't told much about the person, except that she was a prostitute. Now, although being a prostitute isn't really a positive thing today, it doesn't nearly carry as much weight for us as it did back then. Something closer, or just to help you kind of catch the level of of anxiety that would have entered the room when she walked in. Something closer to us might be a known pedophile or a serial killer. I mean, imagine if you knew someone who was like, they were known on the news for being a pedophile or a serial killer, like, and they walked into your house or walked into your party. This would have been the tension that entered the room. So basically, she would have been seen by the Pharisees and those watching as one of the worst of the worst. And in the text, we are even told she is a known sinner. And this is most likely why we have so much detail on this story, because everyone in this moment would have been watching, waiting to see what happened next. It's this person that was not supposed to be there walked in and approached Jesus. And what did happen, I don't think anyone could have expected. See, this woman walked up to Jesus, fell to her knees, and we're told she wept at his feet, and then began to wipe his feet with her hair and her tears. And if you think just picturing that story happening in your own life, right? Like, and that sounds weird. That sounds kind of awkward. Like, what do you do in that moment? Like, it probably wasn't much different. Like, people would have been, what do we do? What do we say? And just seeing the situation beyond the fact that this was a person that wasn't supposed to be there. And now she's doing this in front of Jesus, the proposed Messiah, the prophet. And then we're told how one of the religious leaders responded. In Luke 7:39, we're told this. It says, when the Pharisee who had invited him, that's Jesus, saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. And so maybe you're like me and you read that and you go, whoa. That's harsh, man. Like, there's obviously something very real going on here. This woman is in pain. This is an emotional moment. This is a minute. What a terrible thing to say. What a terrible dude to take this moment and judge her like that and just write her off as worthless. Yet what may be even harsher is when I ask you the question, how many people have you thought this way about? How many people have you labeled as evil, worthless, as scum, as deserving of death? This year, this month, this week, maybe even today. Well, here's Jesus' response to both the religious leaders, and I would go as far as to say to us, when we find ourselves thinking this way about anyone. We're told in Luke 7:40-43 that Jesus answered him and said, Simon, I have something to tell you. And then Simon, tell me, teacher. And Jesus goes on and he says, 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii, and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back. So he forgave the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon replied, well, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. And then he continues with this profound statement. He says, therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. In this moment, Jesus is stating that someone forgiven much will love much. And so basically what he's saying is judgment, condemnation, and hate aren't how to fight injustice. Mercy is. I've heard it said, fire is not how you put out fire. And hate is not how you put out hate. Water puts out fire. Love puts out hate. Mercy puts out hate. And so the reality is we will never change someone's life for the better, let alone the world, through hate. But you can easily find stories all throughout history. In fact, we are so inspired by them, where change for the better has occurred because of love, because of forgiveness, because of mercy. And just think about this for a minute. I don't know about you guys, but I read stories like this and I begin to dig into the context of what's going on and begin to imagine. My mind is like, it just creates things and imagines things beyond just what I'm reading. And I just start to think, that prostitute must have been living in that town for the majority of her life, right? Like during this time, it wasn't you traveled all over the place or you moved a ton. Like you were in that town, and those religious leaders, those Pharisees, like that would have been the town that they were practicing their religious duties in. Like they were there, and she had availability to them long time before Jesus showed up on the scene. Yet, do you think she ever approached them? No way. Why? Well, it's obvious. They would have condemned. They would have judged her. I mean, how often are you willing to go to someone and be vulnerable knowing that they're just going to judge you or condemn you? And so what option did she have other than to continue living the life that she had? Whether she saw it as a negative thing or not. Yet when Jesus showed up, she showed up. And this would have taken a lot more effort than I think we realize. Not only would she have known that she would be condemned, judged, and looked down upon because prostitutes didn't talk to prophets, let alone religious leaders, any more than a known pedophile would be allowed to enter a daycare today. But even beyond that, as you read on, you find out she also brought her most valued possession with her, this alabaster jar full of perfume, and poured it over Jesus. And you might begin to wonder, like, okay, well, what's the big deal with that? Like, I can go get a bottle of perfume at, Kohl's for like $30. Like, not a big deal. Well, anything contained in an alabaster jar during this time had significant value. In fact, it was sealed up and you couldn't get to it until you broke the top of this alabaster jar off. And only the rich of the rich had this type of perfume because it was so expensive. It literally would have cost this prostitute a year's worth of wages. So the question you have to ask is, one, why did she have it? And two, why did she bring it? And why is a prostitute spending her money to get this perfume? Well, the people that she's trying to appeal to the most for her daily income are those who are rich, right? Like that's where she's going to get the most. And so she had made an investment for her next year's wages. And in this moment, that she breaks open this alabaster jar and pours it on Jesus, she's not only honoring Christ, she's not only honoring Jesus and saying, I believe who you are and you're worthy of this, but she's also going, I'm giving up my lifestyle. The life I'm living, I'm giving up for you. And so this woman had heard something about Jesus that caused her to do all that. That caused her to change her life in such a way that we are reading about it now over 2,000 years later. And it wasn't judgment. It wasn't condemnation. It wasn't hate that did this. No, it was the love of Jesus. It was the mercy of Jesus. The Pharisees' response was condemnation and judgment. And Jesus' response was mercy and forgiveness. And so the Pharisees' response left the woman labeled unworthy and in an ability unable to change, stuck in her situation. But Jesus' response left the woman labeled as worthy and able to find freedom. And so in this story, we see Jesus flipping the script like he was so good at doing. He used this sinful woman as an example of what it means to love deeply, to show mercy. And so in short, what we are being told by Micah and what we are being shown by Jesus is that if you want to do justice, you have to love mercy. If we want to do justice, we have to love mercy. And so the question that we have to ask after we read a story like this is which story do you want to be yours? when it comes to injustice. And this is more real than ever, because right now we are in the middle of a serious injustice. And you have to ask, what is your response going to be? What do you want your story to be at the end of it? Do you want it to be that of the Pharisees, the religious leaders? Do you want to focus on pointing out the offenses of people and condemning them and judging them? Because here's the deal, you're probably right, and they deserve it. The people who are saying those things most of them are correct, and they deserve it. But is that the voice that you want to have? Or do you want to have the story of Jesus' response? The one that shows mercy and love and leads to life change. And maybe as I ask that question, you're already saying, okay, Brandon, like you're making that sound way easier than that it is. Like you don't know what I know. You don't know the stuff that I've been through. You don't know what people have said to me. You don't know what, and I get it. There's so much wrong in the world. We live in a broken world. And every day people frustrate and disappoint us. Every day people frustrate and disappoint me. So much so that sometimes I want to see them brought to justice. Just like you do. But here's the deal, and please don't miss this. There's a time and place for people to experience the consequences for their actions. In fact, experiencing consequences for our sin is often a necessary step in the justice process, but it's not on you and it's not on me. And when we place ourselves in this position, we end up more like the religious leaders in this story than we do Jesus. Because God isn't motivated by a desire to punish us. He wants to see us transformed. His mercy has the power to cause the same kind of transformation in our lives that we see in the prostitute. His mercy has the ability to empower us to show that mercy to others. And so when it comes to justice, God is calling us to love mercy. And so if you want to be a part of that, if you want to be a part of making a difference in the same way Jesus did, here are some questions to help you start. Have you ever needed to be forgiven much? Have you ever hurt someone, caused them pain where you needed forgiveness, where you needed mercy? Have you ever had someone show mercy to you? Whether it was a person you know or what you've experienced as you've come to know Christ? How can you allow that forgiveness, that mercy, to transform you? Have you ever refused to show mercy to someone else? Why? What's kept you from doing it? What makes it so hard? And finally, has anyone hurt you recently? How might you show them mercy instead of taking revenge? And if you notice, all those questions I just asked have to do with you. In close proximity to the people that are closest to you. And that's because mercy has to start in close proximity before it can spread out and make a difference in a greater proximity. You're not going to be able to show mercy to others that are far from you if you can't show mercy to those who are close to you. And so if you want to learn how to have mercy like Jesus, it starts at home. It starts with the people closest to you. And so as we've learned over the past couple months, injustice is a very real thing in our world. And if you want to be able to have mercy in the midst of that, if you want to make a real difference, you have to begin reflecting on where that can start, right where you're at. Because as we see all throughout Jesus' story, the fight against injustice starts with mercy. If we want to fight injustice, we have to show mercy. And so as you continue doing your part to fight injustice, I encourage you I implore you, take one from the words of Micah and the actions of Jesus and love mercy, because that is where the beginning of real justice starts.